Hello everyone, I'm That Embroidery Girl and welcome back to another embroidery tutorial. This time it's an Indian inspired textural dimensional embroidery tutorial and we're going to be doing this peacock. So here's the design. You might want to pause it and just transfer it over to a piece of paper. I'm going to be using a chenille and a small darner's needle and lots of embroidery flosses, different colours and some perle, but you can choose whatever colour you fancy. So I've transferred over my design with just a normal water soluble pen and I'm going to go in and start with a bullion stitch. So I'm going to come up, go down and then come up again like you've just seen and wind my thread around in a clockwise direction. This is a whole single thread. I haven't separated this thread at all. And I'm just going to do a bullion stitch by wrapping this thread around the needle. I'm going to measure it to make sure that it's going to be long enough. We want it just slightly too long because we're going to bend it. So it needs to be slightly too long. Pull that thread down and you'll see now we have a perfect bullion stitch. Take the needle down and then couch it into position. Next you're going to want to take the perle thread in dark green and come up and down and then up again and start your cast on stitch. So this is simply just some little loops. If you've ever done knitting, you probably would have casted on in exactly the same way. You're creating these loops over the needle and once you've got enough, you're going to pull your needle through. Now what I like to do is actually measure this. I know that I'm going to need slightly too many stitches because obviously I want to make it round. So it's probably around 2 or 3 stitches extra. And I'm going to measure this by taking the needle down towards my fabric and seeing how much I've got. And once I'm happy, I'm just going to pull this through and secure it nice and tight, take the needle down, and then I'm going to put a couching stitch through the top of this just to hold it in place. Next, I'm going to use some anchor black floss. I've actually got 2 strands here, and I'm just going to outline the beak. And I'm going to do the bottom beak now with 2 stitches, just straight stitches, just to define that out a bit. I'm now going to go in the middle of the head here and create the eye. I'm going to use a really super chunky French knot, and what I'm actually going to do is make this French knot way too big and then come up again and actually stitch it over just so it looks almost more like a bullion knot, but this area is slightly too small to be able to get a bullion knot in, so it's kind of like a little cheat if you will. I'm going to take my small darner's needle next and I'm going to do the neck. So I'm using a turquoise floss here and I'm going to do a bullion knot in exactly the same way that we've done the light blue one. Just wrapping the thread round clockwise direction, measuring it out. Again for the neck we want too many wraps basically because we're going to start bending a shape in. So we really want to go a little slightly over what we want, if that makes sense. And once you're happy with that stitch, bend it into position, manipulate the stitch and just couch in a nice little S bend. Again, we're using a full strand of anchor floss. Now I'm just going to create some little head feathers with some nice deep yellow floss. This is just a straight stitch at an angle up at the head, and I'm then going to take that green perle thread again and do some French knots just to kind of mimic a peacock type of design. I'm then going to take the same thread and create a little bit of a thickness on the neck, and I'm going to do this halfway up with some French knots just like so. I've got some orange embroidery floss now, so I'm going to go ahead and do the tail, and this is just straight stitches going straight across. I'm doing one side and then the other, and I'm trying to fan it out, so I really want there to be more distance at the top than the bottom. I've got a dark blue now and I'm just going to create a cast on stitch again. So I've actually come slightly too much over on the body, if that makes sense, where the corner of the bum would be, and I'm again going to start doing my cast on stitches. And remember, because we want to add a bend, we're actually going to do too many cast ons so that we can add a little bend and it's not just deadly straight. You can measure this really simply by just pulling it down to the fabric and seeing if you have enough. Once you're happy, pull the thread through, make sure that it's nice and tight, hold it down Pull your needle through the fabric and then put a couple of couching stitches. I'm going to probably put 3 in here just to hold it all in place. Again, I'm using the full strand. I haven't separated this off at all. So I'm going to go ahead and use the deep yellow again, just because I want to bring that colour back into the design because it's feeling a little bit fragmented right now. I'm just going to fan out the tail a little bit more and fill it out. So just some straight stitches. I'm only going halfway up these orange feathers because I don't want too much yellow in there. I feel like this should be mainly blue, if anything else. So I'm just going to do halfway up, lots of straight stitches, exactly like so. I've got my water soluble pen. I'm just going to draw a little design in the body. With my small darner's needle, I'm going to begin stitching. Come up, come down, and this is a simple bullion stitch. You should be pretty good at these by now during this design. Measure it out, make sure you've got enough. If you haven't, keep on winding. Pull that needle through, nice and tight, and stitch down. Couch it into position, and you're now going to start filling up the body. So I'm just using up the leftover threads that I've got really now. I'm just going to use a cast on stitch. I want to be quite accurate with this stitch because obviously there's no bend, so it needs to be really well measured. So I'm going to keep on bringing my needle down just to make sure I haven't overshot the amount of stitches that I need. Pull it down so it's nice and tight and secure, and then stitch it in place. I'm not going to need a couching stitch for that one, so I'm going to go ahead and use my dark green Perle again. And it's another cast on stitch just to fill out the body and give it some nice texture. Again, we need to be really accurate, so make sure you're measuring it. When you're happy, pull that thread through, stitch it into place, and it should look like so. I'm now going to lighten up the whole design with some pink embroidery floss. I'm going to just do a simple bullion, and I'm going to oversize this. I want it to be almost like lumpy and a little bit textured. So some nice wraps around this needle, and I'm going to do it almost too long. So like I said, I'm going to do too many. So it's definitely way too many wraps. It will be probably around about 4 millimeters bigger than it should be, and you can see here now it's slightly bumpy. I'm just going to couch that into position. That's exactly what I wanted. And now I'm going to use that pink just to fan out the feathers. So I'm going to add French knots all around the tail like this, and I'm then going to take the rest of the orange thread and do exactly the same and fill up that little space there with some French knots. I'm then going to repeat the process with this turquoise embroidery floss. Again, it's the full strand, and I'm just doing this to edge the ends of the yellow feathers, like so. And I'm finally going to finish off this tail with some dark blue, just some straight line stitches, just to add a little bit of colour. Final step is the legs. This is just back stitch. I'm using 2 strands of anchor embroidery floss and just outlining that little design there. Thank you so much for watching this tutorial. Please do like, subscribe, follow me on Instagram. I'm at That Embroidery Girl. Thank you.